Jesus, having come to the outskirts of Caesarea Philippi, asked his disciples and said to them, "What do men say regarding the Son of Man? Who do they say I am?" They answered him, "Some say you are John the Baptist, others Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Jesus said to them, "And you? Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter said to him, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus responded to him, "You are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, because it was neither flesh nor blood that has revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven."
Matt 16:13-17, Mark 8 verses 27 to 30.
Meanwhile, Herod the Tetrarch, upon hearing about everything that Jesus was doing, had a perplexed spirit, because some were saying that John had come back to life from among the dead, others that Elijah had appeared, and others that one of the ancient prophets had come back to life. Herod then said, "I had John beheaded. So who is this of whom I have heard such great things?" And he desired to see him.
Mark 6 verses 14 to 15, Luke 9 verses 7 to 9.
After the transfiguration, his disciples asked him, saying, "Why, then, do the scribes say that it is necessary for Elijah to come first?" But Jesus answered them, "It is true that Elijah must come and re-establish all things. But I declare to you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but treated him as they wished. It is likewise that they shall cause the Son of Man to suffer." Then his disciples understood that it was John the Baptist about whom he had spoken to them.
Matt 17:10-13, Mark 9 verses 10 to 12.
Resurrection and reincarnation.
Reincarnation was part of the Jewish dogmas under the name resurrection. Only the Sadducees, who thought that everything ended with death, did not believe in it. Jewish ideas on this point, like many others, were not clearly defined because they had only vague and incomplete notions regarding the soul and its connection with the body. They believed that a person who had lived could live again, without comprehending the exact manner in which it could happen. They designated by the word resurrection what Spiritism more correctly calls reincarnation. Actually, resurrection supposes the return to life of the body that died, which science has demonstrated to be materially impossible, especially when the elements of that body have for a long time been dispersed and absorbed. Reincarnation is the return of a soul, or spirit, to corporeal life, but in another body newly formed for it and having nothing in common with the old one. The word resurrection might thus be applied to Lazarus but not to Elijah or the other prophets. Hence, if, according to their belief, John the Baptist was Elijah, John's body could not have been Elijah's, since John had been seen as a child and his mother and father were known. John, then, could be Elijah reincarnated but not resuscitated.
Now, there was a man among the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a senator of the Jews, who went at night to meet Jesus and said to him, "Rabbi, we know you have come from God to instruct us as a doctor, for no one could perform the miracles you are doing if God were not with him." Jesus answered him, "Verily, verily I say to you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again." Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man who is already old be born? Can he enter his mother's womb in order to be born a second time?" Jesus responded, "Verily, verily I say to you, if a man is not born again of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born from flesh is flesh, and that which is born from the Spirit is spirit. Do not be surprised about what I have said to you, that it is necessary for you to be born again. The Spirit blows wherever it wishes and you hear its voice, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. The same occurs with every man who is born of the Spirit." Nicodemus responded to him, "How can this be?" Jesus said to him, You are a teacher in Israel, and yet you are unaware of these things? Verily, verily I say to you that we say only what we know, and that we testify only to what we have seen. Yet you have not accepted our testimony. But if you do not believe me when I speak about things of the earth, how will you believe me when I speak to you about the things of heaven?
John 3 verses 1 to 12. The thought that John the Baptist was Elijah and that the prophets could live again on the earth may be found in many passages of the Gospels, especially in those indicated above. If this belief had been an error, Jesus would not have failed to combat it just as he combated so many others. Far from it, he sanctioned it with all his authority and set it as a principle and necessary condition when he said, "No one can see the kingdom of heaven if he is not born again." And he insisted, adding, "Do not be surprised that I have said that it is necessary for you to be born again." The words, "If a man is not born again of water and of the Spirit," have been interpreted in the sense of regeneration through the waters of baptism, but the original text simply stated, "Not born again of water and of the Spirit," whereas in some translations the words of the Spirit have been replaced by of the Holy Spirit, which no longer implies the same thought. This crucial point stands out in the first commentaries written on the Gospels and will someday be confirmed beyond a doubt. In order to understand the real meaning of these words, one must also pay attention to the significance of the word water, which was not employed in its proper acceptation. The ancients' knowledge regarding the physical sciences was highly imperfect. They believed that the earth had arisen from the waters, and that is the reason they regarded water as the absolute generative element. That is why it is stated in Genesis that the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, it floated over the surface of the waters. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let the waters that are under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry element appear. Let the waters produce living animals that swim in the water and birds that fly above the earth and under the firmament. According to this belief, water became the symbol of the material nature, just as spirit was the symbol of the intelligent nature. The words, "If a man is not born again of water and of the Spirit," or in water and in the Spirit, thus mean, if humans are not born again with their body and their soul. This is the sense in which these words were originally understood. Moreover, such an interpretation is justified by these other words, "That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit." Here, Jesus makes a positive distinction between spirit and body. "That which is born of the flesh is flesh," clearly indicates that only the body proceeds from the body and that the spirit is independent of it. The Spirit blows wherever it wishes and you hear its voice, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going may be understood as the Spirit of God, who gives life to whomever God wishes, or the human soul. In this latter acceptation, you do not know where it comes from or where it is going means that no one knows what the Spirit had been or what it will be. If the spirit or soul were created at the same time as the body, one would know where it came from, because one would know its beginning. In any case, this passage is the consecration of the principle of the pre-existence of the soul, and, consequently, the plurality of existences.
Now, since the time of John the Baptist until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence, and violent are those who obtain it. For up until John, all the prophets and the law thus prophesied. And if you wish to understand what I have said, he himself is Elijah who must come. Let him hear who has ears to hear.
Matt 11:12-15. If the principle of reincarnation as expressed in John could be strictly interpreted in a purely mystical sense, the same could not apply to this passage from Matthew, which is unmistakable. He himself is Elijah, who must come. Here there is neither symbol nor allegory, it is a positive affirmation. Since the time of John the Baptist until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence. What do these words mean, since John the Baptist was still alive at that time? Jesus explains them, saying, "If you want to understand what I have told you, he himself is Elijah, who must come." Hence, since John was none other than Elijah himself, Jesus was alluding to the time when John was living under the name of Elijah. Until the present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence is another allusion to the violence of the Mosaic law, which ordered the extermination of the infidels to win the promised land, the paradise of the Hebrews, whereas according to the new law, heaven is won by charity and kindness. Then he added, "Let him hear who has ears to hear." These words, so frequently repeated by Jesus, clearly state that not everyone was in a condition to understand certain truths.
Those of your people who have been made to die shall live again. Those who have been slain around me shall live again. Awaken from your sleep and sing the praises of God, you who dwell in the dust, for the dew that falls upon you is a dew of light, because you shall destroy the earth and the kingdom of the giants.
Is 26:19. This passage from Isaiah is also quite explicit. Those of your people who have been made to die shall live again. If the prophet had intended to speak of the spirit life, if he had wanted to say that those who had been made to die were not dead in spirit, he would have said, "Live still, and not will live again." In the sense of the spirit, these words would be nonsensical since they would imply an interruption in the life of the soul. In the sense of moral regeneration, however, they would be the negation of eternal punishment, since in principle they establish that all those who are dead will live again.
But when a man has died once, when his body, separated from his spirit, has been consumed, what does he become? Having died once, can he live again? In this war in which I find myself every day of my life, I wait for my transformation to come.
Job 14 verses 10 and 14. Translation by Le Maistre de Sacy.
When a man dies, he loses all his strength and expires. Afterward, where is he? If a man dies, will he live again? Will I wait all the days of my struggle, until that one in which some kind of transformation comes to me?
ID Protestant translation by Osterwald.
When a man has died, he lives forever. The days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return.
ID version of the Greek Church. The principle of the plurality of existences is clearly expressed in these three versions. It cannot be assumed that Job had wanted to speak of regeneration through the waters of baptism, which he of course did not know about. But when a man has died once, could he live again? The idea of dying once and living again implies dying and living again several times. The Greek Church version is even more explicit, if that is possible. The days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return, which means, I shall return to earthly existence. This is as clear as if someone were to say, I'm leaving my house, but I shall return to it. In this war in which I find myself every day of my life, I wait for my transformation to come. Job obviously wanted to speak of the struggle he bore against the miseries of life. He awaits his transformation, meaning, he had resigned himself. In the Greek version, I will wait seems especially to apply to a new existence, the days of my earthly existence ending, I will wait, because to it I shall return. Job seems to place himself after death in the interval that separates one existence from another and says that there he will await his return. Hence, there is no doubt that under the name resurrection, the principle of reincarnation was one of the fundamental beliefs of the Jews, that it was confirmed by Jesus and the prophets formally, from which it follows that to deny reincarnation is to deny the words of Christ himself. Someday, these will comprise an authority regarding this point, like many others, when they are meditated upon without preconceived ideas. However, to this authority, which arises from the religious point of view, is added the philosophical point of view of the proofs that result from observing the facts. When one wants to go from the effects to the cause, reincarnation emerges as an absolute necessity, a condition inherent to humanity, in other words, as a law of nature. It reveals itself by its results in a way that is material, so to speak, like a hidden motor reveals itself by the movement. Only the doctrine of reincarnation can tell human beings where they came from, where they are going and why they are on the earth, and justify all the anomalies and all the apparent injustices that life presents. Without the principle of the pre-existence of the soul and the plurality of existences, most of the maxims in the gospel are unintelligible, and that is why they have given way to such contradictory interpretations. This principle is the key that must restore them to their true meaning.
Family ties are strengthened by reincarnation, but would be severed by a single existence.
Family ties are not destroyed by reincarnation, as certain persons believe. On the contrary, they are strengthened and become tighter. It is the opposite principle that does destroy them. In the spirit world, spirits form groups or families united by affection, sympathy, and similar inclinations. These spirits, happy at being together, seek out one another. Incarnation separates them only momentarily, because after their re-entry into the errant state they meet again like friends who have returned from a journey. Frequently, they even follow one another into incarnation, wherein they are reunited in the same family or the same circle, working together for their mutual advancement. If some are incarnate while others are not, they are nevertheless united by thought. Those who are free watch over those who are captive, the more advanced try to help the less advanced to progress. After each existence, they will have taken a step on the path to perfection. Less and less attached to matter, their affection is more alive due to the fact that since their spirit has become more purified, it is no longer troubled by selfishness or the clouds of the passions. They can therefore pass through an unlimited number of corporeal existences without any harm affecting their mutual affection. It is to be understood that we are here referring to real affection from soul to soul, the only affection that survives the destruction of the body, because the beings of this world, who are united to one another only through the senses, have no reason to look for each other in the world of spirits. There are no lasting affections except spiritual ones. Physical affections die out with the cause that gave rise to them, but that cause no longer exists in the world of spirits, whereas the soul exists forever. As for persons united by the sole reason of self-interest, they really do not mean anything to each other. Death separates them both on earth and in heaven. The union and affection that exist between relatives are an indication of a former sympathy that has brought them together. One also says of someone whose character, tastes, and inclinations have no similarity to those of their closest relatives, that he or she is not of that family. Saying this declares a greater truth than one might suppose. God allows such incarnations of antipathetic or foreign spirits within families with the dual objective of serving as a trial for some and as a means of advancement for others. The bad ones better themselves little by little through contact with the good ones and the care they receive from them. Their character becomes milder, their habits more purified, and antipathies are erased. It is thus that the fusion amongst different categories of spirits is established, as occurs on the earth amongst ethnicities and cultures. The fear of the unending increasing of kinship as a consequence of reincarnation is a selfish fear, which demonstrates that one does not feel a sufficiently broad love to carry it over to a large number of individuals. Does a father who has many children love them all any less than he would if he had only one? But selfish people may rest at ease because such fear is without foundation. From the fact that one man has had 10 incarnations, it does not follow that in the spirit world he will encounter 10 fathers, 10 mothers, 10 wives, and a proportional number of children and new relatives. There he will always re-encounter only the same objects of his affection, those who had been connected with him while on earth under various relationships, or perhaps even the same ones. Let us now look at the consequences of the non-reincarnation doctrine. This doctrine necessarily annuls the pre-existence of the soul. Since souls are created at the same time as the body, there are no previous links between them. They are complete strangers to one another. The father is a stranger to his child. The kinship between families is thus reduced solely to corporeal kinship without any spiritual link. There is therefore no reason to glorify oneself for having had such and such famous personages as ancestors. With reincarnation, ancestors and descendants may have known each other, lived together, loved each another, and find themselves reunited later on in order to tighten their bonds of sympathy. All this has to do with the past. As for the future, according to one of the fundamental dogmas resulting from non-reincarnation, the destiny of souls is irrevocably set after one soul existence. This definitive setting of their destiny implies the cessation of all progress, because if there is any progress, then there is no longer a definitive destiny. Depending on whether they have lived well or badly, they go immediately to either the dwelling place of the blessed or to eternal hell. Hence, they are immediately separated forever, without hope of ever being united again, so that fathers, mothers and children, husbands and wives, brothers, sisters and friends are never certain of seeing each other again. It is the most complete rupture of family ties. With reincarnation and the progress that results from it, all those who have loved one another meet again on earth and in the spirit world, gravitating together to reach God. Those who fail along the way delay their advancement and happiness, but all hope is not lost. Helped, encouraged and upheld by those who love them, they will one day exit the quagmire in which they have been immersed. In short, with reincarnation there is perpetual solidarity between incarnates and discarnates, and hence the tightening of the bonds of affection. In summary, four alternatives are presented to humans for their future beyond the grave. First, nothingness, according to the materialist doctrine. Second, absorption into the universal whole, according to the pantheistic doctrine. Third, individuality with a definitive fixed fate, according to the Church's doctrine. Fourth, individuality with unending progress, according to the Spiritist doctrine. According to the first two, family ties are broken after death, and there is no hope of meeting again. With the third, there is a chance of seeing each other again, provided they are in the same environment, and this environment might be hell as well as heaven. With the plurality of existences, which is inseparable from gradual progression, there is certainty about the continuity of relationships between those who love one another, and this is what comprises the true family.
The Spirit's teachings. The limits of incarnation.
What are the limits of incarnation? Incarnation per se does not have limits precisely traced if the term is understood as referring to the envelope that comprises the body of the spirit, considering that the materiality of this envelope diminishes as the spirit purifies itself. On certain worlds more advanced than Earth, the body is less compact, less heavy and less coarse, and, consequently, less subject to vicissitudes. At a higher degree, it is diaphanous and almost fluidic. Degree by degree, it is dematerialized and ends up melding with the peri-spirit. Depending on the world on which the spirit is called to live, the spirit takes on the envelope appropriate to the nature of that world. The peri-spirit itself endures successive transformations. It becomes more and more etherealized each time up to complete purification, which comprises pure spirits. If special worlds are meant as stations for highly advanced spirits, such spirits are not connected there as on lower worlds. The state of detachment in which they find themselves enables them to go anywhere the missions entrusted to them may call them. If incarnation is considered from the material point of view, as is the case here on Earth, it could be stated that it is limited to less evolved worlds. It therefore depends on the spirit to free itself quickly or less quickly by working for its purification. One must also consider the fact that in the errant state, that is, in the intervals between corporeal existences, the situation of the spirit is in keeping with the nature of the world to which it is connected according to its degree of advancement. That in the errant state it is more or less happy, free and enlightened according to the degree of its dematerialization.
St. Louis, Paris, 1859.
The need for incarnation.
Is incarnation a punishment, and are only guilty spirits subject to it? The passage of spirits through corporeal life is necessary, so that they may accomplish, with the help of physical action, the designs whose execution God has entrusted to them. This is necessary for them, because the activity they are obliged to perform helps the development of their intelligence. God, being supremely just, must regard all his children equally. That is why he gives all of them the same starting point, the same aptitude, the same obligations to fulfill and the same freedom to act. Any privilege would be a preference, and any preference an injustice. But incarnation is nothing for all spirits but a transitory state. It is a task that God imposes on them upon their entry into life as the first test of the use they will make of their free will. Those who fulfill this task with zeal quickly and less painfully clear their first degree of initiation and enjoy the fruits of their labor sooner. On the other hand, those who make bad use of the freedom that God has granted them delay their advancement. It is thus that by their obstinacy they may prolong indefinitely the need to reincarnate, and it is at that point that incarnation becomes a punishment.
St. Louis, Paris, 1859. Comment: a rough comparison will make this difference more understandable. Students can reach degrees of knowledge only after having passed through the series of classes leading to it. These classes, whatever the work they require, are a means for reaching the objective and not a punishment. Diligent students shorten the way and encounter fewer thorns along it. It is otherwise for those whose negligence and laziness obligate them to repeat certain classes. It is not the class work that is a punishment, but the obligation to recommence the same work. The same applies to humankind on the earth. For the spirits of primitives, who are nearly at the beginning of their spirit lives, incarnation is a means for developing their intelligence. However, for educated individuals in whom the moral sense is broadly developed and who are obligated to recommence the steps of a corporeal life full of anguish, when they could have already reached the objective, it is a punishment because of their need to prolong their stay on lower and misfortunate worlds. On the other hand, those who work actively for their moral progress can not only shorten the duration of their physical incarnation, but they may all at once transcend the intermediate degrees that separate them from the more highly evolved worlds. Might spirits incarnate only once on the same globe and fulfill their many existences on different spheres? This opinion would be acceptable only if all the humans on Earth were at the same intellectual and moral level. The differences among them, from primitives to civilized individuals, show the many degrees that they are called to ascend. Moreover, an incarnation must have a useful purpose. But what would be the useful purpose of the ephemeral incarnations of children who die very young? They would have suffered without profiting either themselves or others. God, whose laws are all supremely wise, does nothing useless. Through reincarnation on the same globe, God has willed that the same spirits come into contact again with the chance to repair their mutual offenses. Because of their previous relationships, God wishes, furthermore, to establish family ties on a spiritual basis and to support the principles of solidarity, fraternity and equality as a natural law.